The phone rang at 3 in the afternoon. Yoko Ono was in the apartment at the Dakota, alone, working on some art pieces for an upcoming show. John was in Los Angeles. They'd been separated for 6 months. What people were calling his lost weekend, though it would stretch on much longer than a weekend. She picked up the phone expecting a gallery owner, or maybe John, calling to argue about something. Instead, she heard a voice she didn't recognize. Male. Calm, too calm. Mrs. Lennon, we have your son. Her blood went cold. What? Julian. We picked him up an hour ago in London. He's safe. For now. If you want him to stay that way, you need to listen very carefully. Yoko's mind raced. Julian was 10 years old. He lived in London with John's first wife, Cynthia. He was supposed to be in school. Safe. Protected. If you've hurt him, we haven't. And we won't. As long as you do exactly what we say. First rule. You don't call the police. You don't call anyone. You wait for instructions. We'll contact you in 2 hours. If we see any cops, any security, anything that looks like you didn't listen, the boy disappears. You understand? Yes. Good. Wait by the phone. The line went dead. Yoko stood there, receiver in hand, her entire body shaking. Her first instinct was to call John. But they'd said don't call anyone. Did that include John? It had to include John. They'd be watching, listening somehow. But she couldn't do this alone. She made a decision. Called one number. Not the police. Not John. She called Alan Klein. Klein was their manager. Former manager, technically, things were complicated. But he was still connected. Still powerful. Still the kind of man who knew how to handle situations that existed outside the law. He answered on the first ring. Yoko. They took Julian. Her voice cracked. What? Who took Julian? She told him everything. The call. The threats. The 2-hour deadline. Klein listened without interrupting. Okay, he said when she finished. His voice was steady. All business. You did the right thing calling me. Don't call anyone else. Not the police. Not John. Not yet. Let me make some calls. Stay by your phone. Alan, if they hurt him, they won't. This is about money. It's always about money. They want a payday, not a dead kid. Let me work. He hung up. Yoko paced the apartment. Every minute felt like an hour. She kept looking at the clock, watching the hands move with impossible slowness. In London, it was 8 in the evening. Cynthia Lennon had called the police 2 hours ago when Julian didn't come home from school. They'd told her to wait. Kids go to friends' houses, get distracted. He'd show up. But Cynthia knew. Mothers know. Something was wrong. The police finally took her seriously when a witness came forward, a woman who'd been walking near Julian's school. She'd seen a boy matching his description being led into a car by 2 men, not dragged, not forced, just led. Like he knew them, like he trusted them. The car was a dark sedan. No plates visible. It had driven away heading north. By the time the police issued an alert, the kidnappers were already gone. Vanished into the sprawl of London with a 10-year-old boy who was worth millions to the right buyer. Or the wrong one. Alan Klein made his first call to a lawyer in New York. A man who specialized in situations that required discretion. The lawyer made calls of his own. To people who operated in spaces between legal and illegal, who knew how to find people who didn't want to be found. Klein's second call was to a contact in London, someone with connections to the tabloid press. Because Klein understood something important. If this story broke publicly, Julian would become exponentially more valuable. Every criminal in Europe would be trying to grab him. The kidnappers could auction him off. Or panic and kill him. The story had to be contained. "I need a favor," Klein said. "A big one. John Lennon's son has been taken. Kidnapped. It's going to leak. Probably already has in police channels. I need you to kill the story. Every paper, every station, all of it." The contact was quiet for a moment. "Alan, you know what you're asking? This is the Beatles. This is John Lennon's kid. Every outlet in the world will want this. I know. That's why I'm calling you. You've got connections. Use them. Tell them if they run this story, they'll never get another Beatles interview, another exclusive, another anything. Tell them Lennon will blacklist any outlet that prints a word before this is resolved. That might work for some, but not all. There's always someone willing to break the story for the scoop. Then threaten them. Lawsuit. Injunction. I don't care. This story doesn't run. Not for 4 hours. That's all I need. 4 hours of silence while we handle this. And if I can't deliver that?" Klein's voice went cold. "Then you better hope the kid survives. Because John Lennon will never forgive you. And neither will I." The contact made his calls. Started with the major papers. The Times, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph. Called editors directly. Explained the situation. Explained what was at stake. Most agreed immediately. Not out of kindness. Out of pragmatism. Losing access to the Beatles, to John Lennon, would cost them more than any single story was worth. But there were problems. A reporter at the Daily Mirror had already written a draft, was preparing to run it in the morning edition. The editor tried to kill it, but the reporter went to the publisher. Argued this was news. Real news. The public had a right to know. The publisher was about to side with the reporter when his phone rang. It was someone he hadn't heard from in years. Someone from the Home Office. A government connection. This story about the Lennon boy. "It doesn't run." "Excuse me? You heard me." National security considerations. If this story breaks, it could trigger copycat kidnappings. Celebrity children all over London become targets. The government is requesting, politely, that you hold the story until the situation is resolved. The government can't censor the press. We're not censoring anything. We're asking for cooperation. Temporary. A few hours. And in exchange, you'll get the exclusive when this is over. First interview with the family. First photos. Full access. But only if you wait. The publisher thought about it. Looked at the reporter standing in front of him, eager to break the biggest story of his career. Looked at the phone in his hand and the implicit threat behind the polite request. "Kill it," he told the reporter. "For now." In New York, Yoko's phone rang again, exactly 2 hours after the first call. She grabbed it before the first ring finished. "Mrs. Lennon." "You listened. Good. Here's what happens next. We want $500,000. American. Small bills. You have 12 hours to get it together. That's impossible. The banks are closed. I can't get that kind of money. You're married to John Lennon. You can get anything. Find a way. We'll call back in 12 hours with drop instructions. And Mrs. Lennon, no police. We'll know." The line went dead again. Klein was already working. He'd made calls to 3 different banks. Explained the situation in vague terms. Needed liquid cash for a business emergency. Discretion required. 2 banks said it was impossible on short notice. The third said maybe, if the right people approved it. Klein got the approvals. Called in favors. Made promises. By midnight, he had $500,000 in cash, packed in a briefcase. Waiting. But he also did something else. He called someone who specialized in finding people. An investigator. Former FBI. Now private. Expensive. Effective. I've got 12 hours to find a kidnapped kid in London. Can you help? Maybe. Tell me everything. Klein told him. The investigator listened, taking notes. The voice on the phone. Did it have an accent? Klein relayed the question to Yoko when she called him with updates. She thought about it. Yes, British, but not posh. Working class. East London, maybe? The investigator filed that away. What about the demands? 500,000 American dollars, not pounds. That's specific. Suggests they're planning to leave the country. Probably have a buyer lined up somewhere. This isn't random. Can you find them? In 12 hours? That's tight. But I'll try. I'll need access to the London police reports. And I'll need to work off book. Whatever you need. Cost doesn't matter. It never does. When it's a kid. In London, the investigator landed 4 hours later. He had contacts in Scotland Yard. Men who understood that some situations required flexibility, required looking the other way, while other people did things the law couldn't. By 3 in the morning London time, they had a lead, a witness, a different one, not the woman from earlier, had seen the dark sedan, had noticed it because one of the back windows had a crack in it. Spider web pattern in the lower left corner. It wasn't much, but it was something. The investigator had people checking used car lots, repair shops, anywhere someone might have mentioned a dark sedan with a cracked window. It was needle in haystack work. But they had motivation and resources. And most importantly, they had urgency. At 7 in the morning London time, 2 in the morning in New York, they found the car, abandoned in a warehouse district in East London. The crack in the window matched. Inside, they found a child's backpack. Julian's name written inside. But no Julian, no kidnappers, just the car. The investigator looked at the warehouse, noticed something, fresh tire tracks leading away. A different vehicle. They'd switched cars, smart. But not smart enough, because one of the warehouse workers had seen something. 2 men and a boy getting into a van. White van. Commercial. Driving away at dawn. The investigator got a description. Partial plate number. Put it out to his network. Every contact he had in London started looking for that van. At 8 in the morning London time, the kidnappers called Yoko again. Gave her the drop instructions. There was a park in Central Park, a specific bench. She was to leave the briefcase there at noon, alone. They'd be watching. If they saw anyone else, the deal was off. Klein had the money ready. But he also had a decision to make. Trust the kidnappers to release Julian after getting paid? Or try to grab them during the exchange? The investigator in London called him. We're close. Give me 2 more hours. I think we can find them. Klein looked at his watch. The drop was in 4 hours. If they found Julian before the exchange, perfect. If not, they'd have to pay and hope. You've got 2 hours, Klein said. After that, we're doing this their way. The investigator pushed harder. Got a hit on the van. Security camera at a petrol station had caught it. The driver had paid cash. Hadn't noticed the camera. They had a face now. The investigator ran it through his contacts. Got a name. Timothy Brennan. Small-time criminal. Armed robbery. Extortion. But nothing this big before. Which meant he was working for someone. Someone with resources. Someone who knew the value of Julian Lennon and had the connections to arrange this. The investigator made calls, pushed his contacts in the London underworld. Who would be bold enough to kidnap John Lennon's son? Who had the organization? A name came back. Victor Malloy. Irish. connected to some Republican groups, but mostly just a criminal entrepreneur. Drugs, smuggling, extortion. He'd been expanding, getting ambitious. They found Malloy's location. A flat in Camden. The investigator called Klein. "We think we know where they are, but if we go in hard, they might hurt the boy. Can you get him out safely?" "Maybe. But it's risky." Klein made the call. "Do it. But if anything happens to Julian, if he gets hurt because we rushed this, John will never forgive me. So make damn sure you get him out clean." At 10 in the morning London time, a team moved on the Camden flat. Not police. Private security. Ex-military. The kind of men who knew how to move fast and quiet. They breached the door. Found 3 men inside. And Julian, sitting on a couch, watching television, eating cereal. He looked up when the door crashed in, startled but not panicked. One of the kidnappers reached for a gun. Didn't make it. He was on the floor before his hand touched metal. Julian was scooped up by one of the security team. Carried out of the flat, down the stairs into a waiting car. The whole operation took 90 seconds. The 3 men were left zip-tied on the floor. The investigator called the police with an anonymous tip. Let them handle the arrest. Let the kidnappers face legal consequences. But the important thing was, Julian was safe. The investigator called Klein. "We got him. He's fine. Scared but unharmed. We're taking him to his mother now." Klein exhaled for what felt like the first time in 12 hours. Thank God. He called Yoko. She answered before the first ring finished. They found him. He's safe. She didn't say anything. Just cried. Klein waited. Finally, she managed to speak. "Where is he?" "London. They're taking him to Cynthia now." "He's fine, Yoko. Shaken up, but fine. And the men who took him? Arrested. They'll go away for a long time." Good. Klein had one more call to make. To his contact in London. The one who'd killed the story. "It's over. The boy is safe. You can release the news now. The embargo lifts?" "Yeah. But tell them Yoko gets approval on how it's reported. No sensationalism. No trauma porn. Just the facts. He was taken. He was recovered. He's safe. They won't like that. I don't care. That's the deal. They get the story. We get control of the narrative." The contact made his calls. Within an hour, the news broke. But carefully. Controlled. Julian Lennon, son of John Lennon, was briefly abducted in London earlier today, but has been safely recovered. 3 men have been arrested. The family requests privacy during this difficult time. No details about the ransom demand. No specifics about the rescue. Just enough to satisfy the public's need to know, without turning it into a circus. The papers that had held the story ran their exclusives. Interviews with police. Analysis of celebrity security. Opinion pieces about the price of fame. But they'd waited. For 4 hours, the biggest story in the world had been sitting in editors' offices. And they'd waited. Because Alan Klein had made them wait. Because the government had quietly suggested they wait. Because losing access to the Beatles was too high a price for being first. John Lennon found out 6 hours after Julian was recovered. He was in Los Angeles, drunk, with Harry Nelson. Someone, Klein, probably, had finally called him. John sobered up instantly, booked the first flight to London, called Cynthia from the airport. "Is he okay?" "He's fine, John." Frightened. "But fine, I should have been there, I should have, you couldn't have known, no one could have known." But John carried it anyway. The guilt. The what-ifs. He spent a week in London with Julian. Took him to the zoo. To movies. Just spent time with him. Making up for the separation. For the divorce. For all the ways he'd failed to be there. Years later, when Julian was grown, a journalist asked him about the kidnapping. He remembered it, but vaguely. I was more confused than scared, Julian said. These men told me they were friends of my dad, that they were taking me to see him. I believed them, because I was 10, and I wanted to see my dad. It wasn't until later, when the police came, that I understood what had really happened. Do you blame your father for being famous? For putting you in that position? Julian thought about it. No. I blame the men who took me. My father didn't ask to be famous, he just made music. Really good music. And some people decided that made his family a target. That's not his fault. The 3 kidnappers were convicted, served long sentences. Victor Malloy, the mastermind, got 20 years. He died in prison in 1989. Timothy Brennan, the one who made the calls to Yoko, got 15 years. When he was released, he tried to sell his story. No one would buy it. The story had already been told, and retelling it just made him look like the criminal he was. The media silence that day became legend in journalism circles. How do you suppress the biggest story in the world for 4 hours? How do you get every major outlet to hold the presses, kill the segment, wait for clearance? A combination of threats, favors, and government pressure. A coordinated effort involving managers, lawyers, investigators, and shadowy government contacts who understood that sometimes the public's right to know had to be balanced against a child's right to safety. It worked, because everyone involved understood the stakes. Understood that if this story broke too early, Julian Lennon might die. And that was unacceptable. Alan Klein never talked about it publicly. When asked, he'd just say, "We handled it. That's all that matters." Yoko never spoke about it either. Too painful, too close to losing something irreplaceable. But sometimes, late at night, she'd think about those hours, waiting by the phone, not knowing if she'd ever see Julian again, not knowing if her decisions, to call Klein, to not call the police, to wait, were the right ones. She'd made a choice. To trust, to let people who operated outside the law handle something the law couldn't fix fast enough. And it had worked. Julian came home. The kidnappers went to prison. The story broke on their terms. But it could have gone differently. So easily it could have ended in tragedy. That's what kept her up some nights. Not what happened, but what could have happened. The alternate timeline where she made a different choice, where the kidnappers panicked, where Julian didn't come home. She never told John about those thoughts, about the fear that still lived in her years later. He had his own guilt to carry, his own what-ifs. They divorced eventually, separated by geography and lifestyle and all the complicated ways people grow apart. But they stayed connected, because they'd shared this moment of absolute terror, this near miss with unthinkable loss. John was murdered in 1980, shot outside the Dakota, the same building where Yoko had taken that first phone call 7 years earlier. When Julian heard the news, he flew to New York immediately, went to Yoko. They sat together in that same apartment, in the same rooms where she'd paced, waiting for news about his kidnapping. "I never thanked you," Julian said, "for what you did that day, for getting me back." Yoko shook her head. "Alan got you back. And the investigator. And luck. A lot of luck. But you made the right calls. You trusted the right people. You didn't panic. I was terrified. But you didn't let the terror control you. You saved my life." They sat in silence. 2 people connected by tragedy, by loss, by the strange ways that danger and grief bind people together. The story of Julian's kidnapping faded from public consciousness, overshadowed by John's murder, by the mythology of the Beatles, by all the other dramas that fill the spaces between major events. But it happened. For 12 hours in 1973, John Lennon's 10-year-old son was held by criminals who saw him as nothing more than a commodity, a bargaining chip, a way to get rich. And for 4 hours, every major media outlet in the world knew about it and said nothing, because they were asked to wait, because the alternative was too dangerous, because sometimes the story isn't more important than the life. The phones rang, the deals were made, the silence held, and a boy came home, frightened, but alive. Safe but forever changed by the knowledge that being John Lennon's son came with a price. The world eventually found out. But by then it was over. The danger had passed. The child was safe. And the men who'd orchestrated the silence, Klein and his network of lawyers and fixers and connected men who operated in the gray spaces between legal and illegal, they'd done their job. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. Because some stories are more important than the scoop. Some lives are more valuable than the headline. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than any news report ever could.